Hello and welcome back. So in the previous video on Legacy and Holocrons, I talked a little bit about what Holocrons are and how Legends Holocrons differ from canon Holocrons, basically how they function and their relevance within the Star Wars universe. This time around I wanted to talk about Holocron construction. So let's start with why would somebody construct a Holocron? Well, the Jedi constructed them as teaching tools, which made sense because the Jedi had academies and students and a learning system, and basically they functioned, as I said, like textbooks. Datacrons were just designed to store information. Sith holocrons, basically they had that older tradition, and the technique for making them was so much more complicated than the Jedi ones, because the Jedi ones, you teach the method for making the holocrons, it's the same. The Jedi holocrons all look very similar, if not identical. If you see them in Clone Wars, they're just walls of them, and they're all the same. Sith holocrons are an individual process. And so why would a Sith Master make one? Well, a lot of the Sith Masters who were super selfish and just concerned with the rise to power didn't make holocrons. The ones who did were, or most of them, the mystics, the ones who were concerned with legacy, the ones who were trying to preserve a Sith legacy that pre-existed or predated them and pass it down to future generations. The holocron is basically a means to immortality for Sith. Sometimes, like with Darth Adedu, that was literal. He stored his essence in there so that it could possess somebody later down the road. But for others, it was basically just a way to take what they know and preserve it and become part of the legacy. And so it was based on pride. It was this idea that I'm worthy to do this. But it was also based on this sort of sense of, believe it or not, community and this grab for immortality or for legacy. So the way that a holocron was constructed, it was time consuming, and the Sith masters had to really try to meditate and try and fail and put a lot of energy into this. And the reason that they did it, again, was that legacy. So the components of a holocron. In the middle, you have the crystal matrix. Now, the crystal matrix usually has intricate designs in it. For instance, the most famous holocron, the holocron of heresies, there's all those interesting designs in there. And what the crystal matrix is it's not a crystal with stuff engraved on it. It's crystal shards or crystal strands of filament, which is why I think 3D printing is so appropriate for these. It's strands of crystal filament overlapped into a crystal matrix. And this has to be manipulated on the subatomic level by a Sith Master using the Force and meditating while they do it. One wrong turn in this thing and the whole thing will crumble into dust. So they have to create this crystal matrix, and there's no blueprint for this. The matrix has to be specific to them because it's going to hold their essence or hold their personality. So they meditate and they create the crystal matrix. The next thing that they do after they have a stable matrix, or at least a reasonably stable matrix, is they they install into it a capstone crystal. Now, in canon now, holocrons have inside of them a kyber crystal, and they're powered by a kyber crystal. In Legends, the Sith holocrons had a black crystal that was not a kyber crystal. You could stick a kyber crystal in a holocron to preserve it as a relic, but the holocron was powered by this black crystal that was never really truly described. But it was the power of the holocron, and it was the seat of the gatekeeper, or the AI, that maintained the information. So you had the crystal matrix, you had the capstone, which usually lived up in here, and then you have the frame of the holocron. Okay, so the idea behind it, the capstone powers it and holds the gatekeeper, the crystal matrix holds all the information, and the frame stabilizes the holocron so the whole thing doesn't crumble into dust and basically contains its power, contains its essence. So to make one, you started off making the holocron, and then, the crystal matrix, and then after that you had what was called the ritual of commencement. And again, it took a powerful Sith to do this. It was a specific ritual of Sith sorcery. And in the ritual of commencement, you would basically take your consciousness and you would lock it in that capstone, and you'd establish a gatekeeper. Now, the gatekeeper is more than an AI, it's your personality. So if the Sith Lord is very secretive, the gatekeeper's not going to allow a lot of information from the holocron without some prerequisites. If the Sith Lord is very proud, they're going to share this information all over the place. So unlike a Jedi holocron that would sort of paste you, the Sith one might say, "You're not ready for this, but you asked? There you go, here's your information. If it destroys you, then you are clearly not worthy." So the gatekeepers were the personality or the essence of the creator of the holocron. They'd show up as a holocron or as a hologram. Darth Krayt was consulting when he was trying to figure out how to get the parasites off of him. He was consulting Darth Nihilus, Darth Adedu, and Darth Bane, all because of their ability to transfer essence. Darth Nihilus transferred his essence into his armor. Darth Bane rid himself of parasites and figured out how to contain and regenerate himself. And Darth Adedu passed his essence down through his holocron to somebody else later down the road. So he was basically looking for this knowledge. He found the appropriate holocrons, and he was consulting the gatekeepers. But all three of those gatekeepers saw him as a pretender and refused to share that information. So it's more than just a search engine that's in the holocron. It will give you information or deny it to you based off of the personality of the author of the holocron. So the ritual of commencement is where that gatekeeper is locked away within the holocron and established. The gatekeeper sort of rules over the data. After that, there's what's called the ritual of invocation. And if you do the ritual of invocation before you do the ritual of commencement, then the holocron becomes unstable and fades over time. If you do them in proper order, they last for thousands and thousands of years. So the ritual of invocation was where you stabilized the matrix and you added the frame. And each frame, again, had to be specific. If you used the frame from another Sith's holocron, it wouldn't stabilize, and again, the whole thing would fall apart. It had to be reflective of you. So the ritual of invocation added the frame. And if you didn't do these things in the right order, again, everything sort of fell apart. So if you created the matrix, established the gatekeeper, and then created the frame, you ended up with this holocron that could hold pretty much infinite amounts of information and would last forever and would carry your legacy and whatever else you put in it down through the ages. So that's the basic idea, and that's how the Sith, in secrecy, preserved a lot of their culture, because the Jedi had temples and stuff, and the Sith had those upon occasion, but they'd all get torn down, and the Sith would go into hiding, and there would be periods of upheaval, and the only way that information and that legacy was transmitted down through the ages was through these holocrons. All right, so speaking of transmitted through the ages, that's what the next video is going to focus on. Join me back for that one, and we'll finish up this Holocron 101.